A very good afternoon, sir. So we wanted to have an interaction with you, and we would like to ask you some questions. So I would start by asking you, in a time when pharmacy wasn't the most popular career choice, what inspired you to take up your career in this field?
The truthful answer is I came by default. Okay. My interest was actually in engineering, and more specifically marine engineering. I had applied for one of the exams at that time, which was supposed to be the entrance exam for marine engineering. I didn't clear it. Then, just like everybody else, depending on your marks, you apply for medicine. My marks were not enough to get into medical school, so I went to do BSc. I actually did BSc for 1 month at SIS. But luckily at that time, the number of seats at Bombay College of Pharmacy was doubled from 30 to 60. And sometime during my BSc, I'd actually filled the form for Bombay College of Pharmacy. And then I got a call or a telegram that there is a seat you can take. So I joined after about a month, and my roll number was 56. To indicate that I was the 26th among that 30 people.
Extra 30 people, yes, sir.
So just kind of like default, I really didn't know what was pharmacy when I joined. Okay, and at that time, you are correct in saying that it was not a very well-known field or a very popular field. But then I thought, okay, I'll take a go at it. I didn't know anything. Nobody to guide me also. My father is a banker.
Oh.
And all the people around me where I grew up, very few would go to finish graduation. So the only thing very popular was, as usual, if you are a good student, you try for medicine, you try for engineering. If you don't get that, you go for BSc. Or you go for dentistry, etc. I had got admission to dental school, but I thought okay, pharmacy is better than dentistry, for whatever reason at that time. So, kind of like default into pharmacy.
So the next question is, in the course of such a dynamic career, were there any hardships you faced that you would like to share with the students?
Yeah, lot of hardships. Okay. First of all, financial hardship. Dad was the only earning member. We were 5 kids. I was the oldest. So while growing up, or even during college, I rarely had money for anything else. Okay, very strict budget. Like this 3 shirt, 2 pant kind of thing, always in rotation. Picnic, etc. I had to think twice before saying yes to it. So it was difficult. It was not that easy. I couldn't afford classes and all. That's why even after 10th and 11th, most of people used to go for classes to prepare for IIT and engineering. My dad couldn't afford it. But what happened is, during the 12th, I realized that most of my colleagues were in classes. So because of that, they already knew what stuff was supposed to be said in class, and they would come in the class and simply create a ruckus and not allow people who are sitting to listen attentively because they knew everything. And I think somewhere in like 7 months into my 12th, out of desperation, I joined classes because my college, they were not allowing teachers to teach. So they would come, create a problem, teacher would say lecture nahi lega, and they would walk up. And affected people were a few like me who had no classes to back up. So finally, like with 4 or 5 months left, I joined classes. And luckily they took me, and somehow from there. But that has been a problem all through. Okay, my dad being a sole learner. And then in addition, when I was finishing my B.Pharm and I was kind of doing my M.Pharm, my dad was unwell. Okay, so at that time, it was almost like finish your B.Pharm, M.Pharm and start a job. Because finances were needed at home. My dad was having trouble going to work at that time. Luckily, it turned out that he got better and I was able to pursue my PhD. Okay, but main hardships were, in a sense, financial, and second, also this pressure from home that dad is not well. Okay, but fingers, very interestingly, my dad finally lived till 92. He died just 2 years ago. So what was that time was more like a little hitch. But for a person who is 19, 20, 21, who suddenly gets to realize dad is not well, it's a big pressure, no? You don't know how to think, and your support system is gone. But that was the main hardship. Baaki kuch.
Sir, having pursued your PhD at the University of Minnesota in United States, how would you describe your overall experience there on both an academic and on a personal level?
On an academic level, it was a big change in way I thought you should be learning. Okay, when I was doing my B.Pharm and M.Pharm, the system in India emphasizes a lot more on kind of basically writing back what the teacher has taught you. So there's a fair amount of what is called as rote memorization and questions of the type briefly describe, write short notes on, or describe in detail, etc. The first big change I saw there was when you did an exam there will be little to no questions which are of that type. Okay, nothing like definition, nothing like list. Almost everything is application of your knowledge. So nothing in the exam would have been directly taught in class. It would also always be taught in an indirect fashion. So you're like learning to use the information which you learned in class. Okay, and that was a big change because that you need to rewire yourself to start thinking in an applied fashion. Okay, so that is from an academic front. But from a personal front, I get to know a new culture. Unlike a lot of my friends who used to hang out with Indians, I made it a point to hang out with Caucasians as much as I did hang out with Indians. Because I wanted to know what their culture is. In that regard, I had some very good friends who took me in and kind of told me a lot about their family. To the point that just about a week ago, my first friend in the US came here, visited my family, spent a couple of days with me. So the friendship is still there. And I know his family. I'm almost like a godfather to his kid because they have this concept of what you call as godfather. So you get to know a lot. So that is a very nice thing to learn a different culture. And when you are in US, not only do you learn culture of the locals there are a lot of other foreign students. So you get to meet students from Africa, you get to meet students from China, from Russia, from Europe, from England. They all come with different perspectives and a different culture. You get to learn new languages, new ways of approaching life, new cultural little tidbits as they call it, and that's very wonderful. So both academically as well as personally, it was a great time.
Sir, you were there for how many years?
A total of 11 years.
Including PhD?
PhD was 4.5, 5 years. And then I did 2 postdocs. One postdoc was for 3.5 years, the other one was 2 years. So collectively around 11. I left in 87 September. I came back February 98.
11 years.
So just about 11 years.
So how, in your opinion, does the education system and overall university experience of America differ from that of India?
As I told you, at least at the level of maybe schooling and maybe up to 12th standard, and even if you go to some clean programs like BSc, even our B.Pharm, we tend to emphasize a lot on what is called as a memorization, assimilating knowledge, and presenting what you have assimilated in an exam. The biggest difference I find between this system and there is applied. Okay, there the questions are more applied, and that starts fairly earlier. Okay, even if they are B.Pharm, you'll find a lot of applied questions. Okay, we find that system here in a lot of universities like IITs, BITS, etc., where the tendency is to ask you a lot of applied questions. Okay, hopefully our other systems with NEP and all, even though that will come as part of our regular. So at that time, you might find less difference between our education and that. But our system of education does have an advantage also. in that we are able to retain a lot of information for a longer time, much better than our maybe American counterparts. Okay, where emphasis is not on memorization, and therefore for every little thing they kind of tend to look up, while we have this lot of information with us because of that little habit of remembering things.
Memorizing.
So sometimes it works to our advantage. So I don't think memorization should not be there. It is just that you have to balance how much is memorized information in an exam versus what is applied. And having all applied also has a disadvantage in that now students don't tend to retain information which is crucial, and they always keep looking up things. Okay, so a balance is probably better.
Sir, as someone who had been awarded the University of Minnesota President's Student Leadership and Service Award, could you share the key to be a leader while still being a team player?
That award was under very, painful circumstances. Okay, what had happened actually was we had an Indian student in our program, and he was brilliant. Okay, I'm trying to remember his name. It was Singh. Okay, some Singh. He is from North, but he was brilliant, so brilliant that it broke all records. Okay, for example, in the medicinal chemistry program, for qualifying for your PhD, you have to pass 5 exams. Okay, and you have to pass in about 20 to 25 attempts. So you can imagine how difficult those exams are. Okay, most of the people who join the program in their first year would not clear any exam because they would not understand the question. Only as they take more courses in the university and their information and knowledge systems kind of build up, then they would start attempting this exam successfully in their second year, third year. And by the time they are maybe 3 years into the program, they would have finished those required 5 to 7 passings as Okay, but the interesting thing is every year you would get around 6 or 7 attempts. So your first year 6 attempts are gone. So the pressure is on you in that remaining maybe 18 attempts you have to clear 7 or 5. Then your second year, if you don't clear 4 out of 6, now you're left with only about 14 attempts to clear the remaining 3. So pressure builds up. This fellow cleared everything in the first year.
In the first go?
The first 5-6 attempts, he had cleared everything. He was that brilliant. Okay, but unfortunately, one day he actually committed suicide, and we don't know why exactly. Okay, and at that time, because I was already into the program for 2.5 years, they asked me to coordinate with his parents back home to kind of arrange for his funeral rites and everything. And with all the other Indians who were with me, we all did that. Okay, it was very unfortunate. But during that time, because I collected everything, the university thought that they should give me a leadership award. So it is not like leadership for very interesting things, but it's just that I brought the community together and we did that for it. Okay, that anybody would have done. Okay, so I'm not a leader, I was there in the group as a senior student and I did it, that's all. Okay, so very unfortunate, but it's now there in my CV or whatever. Okay.
So your extensive research in the field of pharmaceutical chemistry is very impressive and inspiring. What was it that motivated you to pursue a career in pharmaceutical chemistry?
I actually joined the research program at University of Minnesota, which at that time used to be called Department of Pharmacognosy and Medicinal Chemistry. Okay. And as I was pursuing my PhD, they changed the name to the Department of Pharmaceutical Cell Systems. Okay, so all the people in the department used to work with different types of cells. One used to work with microbial cells, one used to work with fungal cells, one used to work with animal cells, one used to work with plant cells. And out of all that, my interest was actually in plants, because I wanted to do plant tissue culture.
Plant tissue culture.
Okay. My MPharm is also in a very interesting discipline. It's called Medicinal and Natural Products at ICT. And my guide was Dr. Vasudevan, who was pharmacognosy.
Oh.
So when I joined that program, my interest was in tissue culture, but the person who was doing tissue culture was due to retire in a year. So he said, I'm not accepting any students. So I joined the youngest faculty, and the youngest faculty used to work with liver cells, doing drug metabolism. And that's how I did drug metabolism. And drug metabolism comes under pharmaceutical chemistry. So I ended up being a medicinal chemist, but with very little synthetic experience, but more biochemistry experience, working with enzymes and doing DMPK, as they call it. That's how it has been.
Sir, as the assistant editor for the Indian Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences, could you share some insights into the editorial process and your role in maintaining the quality and the relevance to the published research in the field?
Okay, if you look at it very carefully, I was assistant editor. Okay, now I'm more like a advisory role. Okay, I don't help with the journal anymore. But when I did for 4 or 5 years, my main job was to look at all the papers that we receive for publication and do the initial scrutiny to make sure they follow all the guidelines. And if they followed guidelines, then I would pass it on to the next stage, which is assigning referees to review the paper. Okay, and we had a whole panel of referees, and we used to feel, who is most suited to review this paper and send it to them. In the same breath, all those papers which didn't follow the norms of IJPS, we would send it back to the authors. And if the deviation was minor, we would say, please resubmit with the revision. But the deviation was too much, we would simply reject, saying that it is not at all according to format. Okay, so my duty was basically to screen in the initial stages whether paper is within the format of IJPS. If not, take a call whether I should send for revision or to reject it. And then all those are accepted, I would assign referees to them. Okay, so that was what I did as a editorial assistant editor. Okay, after all that came back, all the papers would go to the main editor, which was Dr. Rao, who would take then a final call of accepting the paper or rejecting the paper, depending on what are the comments received by the reviewers. Okay, then a little later, when things got more hectic and I couldn't keep up with that because that's an honorary position, I asked Dr. Rao to be relieved from that because saying that I couldn't do it because it was taking too much time. Okay, so that's been a long time ago, but I'm still on the board in an advisory capacity, and I still assist in different ways, but I'm no longer a classic assistant editor. Okay.
Sir, amongst your many remarkable published papers and research articles, is there any specific piece of research or innovation in the field of pharmaceutical chemistry that you would want the students to definitely know and learn about?
Know and learn about. There's one paper, if you follow my CV, which actually got an award, and that got an award at 2 places. When I presented it as a poster, it got an award as a best poster. A little later, when I published it, it got the award as the best publication for that year in the journal of, if I remember, which journal was it? It was Drug Metabolism and Disposition as the best paper in the field of drug metabolism in that year. And that paper involved looking at the mechanism by which oxidation occurs, and oxidation pathway which was pretty much accepted by many people at that time, that if you have a benzene ring, it would form a epoxide will open up and you'll get a phenol. We showed that the first step need not be epoxide formation. Okay, it could be another mechanism which then can either go through the epoxide pathway or avoid the epoxide pathway. But the design of that experiment was very beautiful. Okay, and that is something you should look at. In addition to that, there's another paper where I done a lot of work with deuterated xylenes and biphenyl. And that's a way of kind of looking at how big or how small the active site is by using deuterated compounds. So it's a very interesting way of studying enzymes. So I would suggest that you take a look at it.
Sure, sir. Sir, based on your experience, can you please tell us that how is research work translated from a lab to a clinical setting?
The research work which occurs in a lab versus what ends up in a clinic, uh, is like a teamwork. Okay, I couldn't say that any one person and their research ends up giving you a compound which will be in the clinic. Okay, it's only in most cases that initial compound which is active is rarely the one which ends up in the clinic. So after that initial step where you make a compound and you show that it has some activity, there are a lot of things you have to do. Make sure it is safe, make sure it's effective, make sure it has the right properties for formulating, make sure it has the right pK values, make sure it is easy to synthesize in bulk, make sure synthesis is straightforward so that it doesn't add to the cost. So when that happens, you find that a lot of people from different fields start contributing to the development of that compound. So this could be, a chemist, a physicist, a mathematician, a statistician, a molecular biologist, an enzymologist, a toxicologist, a formulation chemist, an industrial pharmacist, a process chemist, then finally a marketing person.
To market the product.
So you'll find that no one person is responsible. So it's a lot of steps, and the number of people taking part is numerous. I can say that not less than maybe 5,000 people contribute to bringing a drug into the market. Okay, if you were to include them working as a team. So it's a big effort. Okay, to bring. And finally, don't forget those volunteers who take part in the study. They are technically part of that process. So all those people who do phase 1 and phase 2, phase 3 before the drug is marketed, they can be also considered as participants in this whole venture. So it's very difficult to say what makes a drug go from the lab to a clinic. It is just lot of studies, and all those studies are basically filters to filter compounds and retain the compounds which are bad and let the compounds which are good go to the next step. Then you again put another filter. All those which are bad are retained, all which are good next. So as you do this multiple filtrations, what you find is you start with a lot, like 10,000, 20,000 compounds, filtration. Finally you end up with 2 or 3, and out of that one makes it to the clinic. This is a long drawn out process. Okay?
Sir, on an ending note, what advice would you give to all the budding pharmacists?
My advice is always, when you are doing your pharmacy, pay attention to what is being said in class. Be attentive, attend everything. Also read a lot on the side. Don't always think that what is there in class is enough. You have to go read textbooks. If you want to go read research, always have that thirst to study. Okay, and as you do that, again, one of the always thing I tell people is, you need to be honest, you need to have integrity, a capacity to hard work, and be truthful. If you concentrate on your studies, so study hard, realize how to remember things, realize how to apply, and as you are doing that, you maintain your other principles of honesty, integrity, and hard work,
Being truthful.
and truthfulness. You will succeed.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable time and experience. I hope it benefits all the students out there.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.